The Round River Drive. 'Twas 65 or 64, back then in times of recent war, or after that, or just before. Those were the days in Michigan, the good old days when any man could cut and skid and log and haul, and there was pine enough for all. Then all a logger had to do was find some timber that was new, beside a stream. He knew it ran to Huron or Lake Michigan, that at its mouth a mill there was, to take the timber through its saws. In those old days the pioneer, he did not need his title clear to mansions there or timber here. Paul Bunyan, you will have heard of Paul. He was the kingpin of them all, the greatest logger in the land. He had a kick in either hand, and licked more men and drove more miles, and got more drunk in more new styles than any other peavy prince before or then or ever since. Paul Bunyan bossed that famous crew, a bunch of fighting bruisers too. Black MacDonald, Dirty Dan, Dutch Jake, Red Murphy, Pat McCann, Bad Silver Jack and One-Eyed Ross, 10 burlers from Tittibawas, lads from Bay City, Saginaw, Big Fournier, Tugleg Bonifant and more, that didn't give a damn, the kind of men to break a jam, clean up a barroom, rustle ram, or give a 10-spot to a bum. Paul Bunyan and that fighting crew in 65 or 4 or 2, they started out to find the pines without regard to section lines. So north by west they made their way 100 miles until one day they found good timber on high land and roaring water right at hand. They built a bunk and cookhouse there. They didn't know exactly where, and what is more, they didn't care. Before the spring, I give my word, some mighty funny things occurred. Now near the camp there was a spring. Hot, it would steam like anything. One day the chap that hauled supplies had on a load of mammoth size. A load of peas, a blooming mess, fell in the spring, a ton I guess. He came to camp expecting he would get from Bunyan the GB, but Joe the cook, a French Canuck, says, "Paul, I think it is the fun, and we will have the grand bouillon." To prove the teamster not at fault, he took some pepper, pork and salt, right proportion of each of these, and threw them in among the peas. We had enough and good soup too to last us all the winter through. The rest of us were kind of glad he'd spilt the peas when soup we had, but gosh, the flunkies, they were mad, because each day they had to tramp 3 miles to tote the soup to camp. Joe had a stove, some furnace too, right size for the Paul Bunyan crew. Say what you will, it is the meat, the pie and sinkers, choppers eat, that gets results. It is the beams and spuds that are the best machines for cutting Norway, skidding pine and keeping hemlock drives in line. That stove of Joe's, it was a rig for cooking grub that was so big it took a solid cord of wood to start the fire a-going good. The flunkies cleaned 340s bare each week to keep the fire there. The stove's dimensions, north and south, and east and westward and so forth, I don't remember just exact, and I would hate to state a fact unless I knew the fact was true, for I would hate deceiving you. But once I remember when Joe was putting in a bunch of dough, and then he thought, at least he tried, to get around the other side, but long before the bend had turned, the bread not only baked, it burned. Joe had 2 blacks for flunkies, Tom and Sam. He used to strap a great big ham upon the foot of each of them when he made pancakes each AM. They'd skate around the stove lids for an hour or so, or maybe more, and grease for him. But one day, old Pink-Eyed Martin, anyway, he couldn't see so very good. Old Pink-Eye, he misunderstood, which was the baking powder can, and in the dough 4 fingers ran of powder blasting, powder black. Those blackies never did come back. They waited for a week or so, but never found them. That you know, it was the year of blue snow. We put 100 million feet on skids that winter, hard to beat. You say it was? That was some crew. We took it all off 140 too. At least 100 million in. 'Twas time for driving to begin. We broke the rollways in a rush and started through the rain and slush to drive that 100 million down until we reached some sawmill town. We didn't know the river's name, nor where to someone's sawmill came, but figured that without a doubt to some good town it would bring out if we observed the usual plan and drove the way the river ran. Well, after we had driven for a week or so, or maybe more, we came across a pyramid that looked just like our 40 did. 2 weeks again, another crew. Then looked like our camp came in view. Then Bunyan called us all ashore and called a council like of war. Says Paul, with all this lumbering, our logs won't bring us one damn thing. The next day after, Silver Jim, he had the wits scared out of him. For a while he's breaking of a jam. He comes upon the remains of Sam, our black who made the biggest vent as through the cookhouse ceiling went. When Pig-Eye grabbed the fatal tin and put the blasting powder in, and we realised at last that every camp that we had passed was ours. Yes, 'twas thus we found the river we was on was round, and though we'd driven many a mile, we drove a circle all the while. And that's the truth as I'm alive, about the great Round River Drive. What's that? Did ever anyone come on that camp of 61 or 63 or 65, the year we drove Round River Drive? Yes, Robert Rayburn, Pat and me, T. Hanson and some 2 or 3 of good and faithful gentlemen came upon that famous campaign in west of Grayling, several miles, where all the face of nature smiles. We found the place in 84, but it had changed some since the war. The fire had run some summer through and spoiled the logs and timber too. The sun had dried the river clean, but still its bed was clearly seen, so we knew it was the place, for of the past we found some trace. The Jew's harp Tom could play so well, a peavy with a circle L, for that you know was Bunyan's mark. The hour was late, 'twas getting dark, we westward went, a corner found, and took another look around. Round River, so we learned that day, on section 37 lay.